Next, we'll be hearing from Scott Semegran. Scott lives in Austin, Texas, with his wife, 4 kids, 2 cats, and 1 dog. He graduated from the University of Texas at Austin with a degree in English. He's a cartoonist and a writer. And I like this line in his bio. He can also bend metal with his mind and run really fast, if chased by a pack of wolves. I hope you haven't had to use that skill. His comic strips have appeared in the following newspapers: the Austin Student, the Funny Times, the Austin American-Statesman, Rocky Mountain Bullhorn, 7 Days, UT at Dallas Mercury, and the North Austin Bee. His short stories have appeared in independent publications and literary journals, like The Next One literary journal from Texas Tech University Honors College. He is a Kindle best-selling author. We're so pleased to have him with us tonight.
Hello everybody, thanks for coming. Tonight I will be reading a chapter from my novel, The Meteoric Rise of Simon Birchwood. It is about Simon and his dream of becoming a famous writer. In the novel, his dream is to be fulfilled in New York City, but in the chapter I am reading for you, Simon makes a stop in Montgomery, Alabama to visit a childhood friend, Jason, before continuing on to New York City. Jason has picked Simon up from the airport, and he's going to drive them through the old neighborhood where they grew up together. The reason I picked this chapter is because, really at its heart, it's a meditation on memory. How sometimes when you revisit a place from your past, and it's exactly how you remember it to be, or sometimes you have to reckon with the fact that things are quite different than you remember them to be, and you have to wrestle with where is the truth. So anyway, here's chapter 8 from The Meteoric Rise of Simon Birchwood. The pine trees surrounding the old neighborhood were taller and more majestic than I even remembered them to be. I rolled the window down and let the fresh Alabama air rush in the car. The air smelled noticeably different than the Texas air, mainly because of the pine trees. But also, for some reason, my allergies didn't exist here like they did in Austin. My clear nasal passages took in the air freely and deeply. My nostrils were so clear that I felt like a different person. It's true. I hated having allergies. They made me fucking miserable. What with my nose running all over the place and the headaches and the coughing and the sneezing. The headaches were the worst part, but I didn't have them here, and the sun was getting ready to set soon. It made for a mesmerizing ride in Jason's crapmobile. It smells so good outside, I said. Wait till we pass the old swampy lake behind the neighborhood. You'll change your tune then. Still smells like a toilet back there. Jason downshifted the car into third and pulled into the turning lane for the entrance to our old neighborhood. Another black cloud rose from the back of the Chevette, and the cars that were behind us honked and swerved. It was fucking hilarious. It really was. I thought Jason's car was about to kill itself, Harry Carey style. It knocked and screamed as much as it possibly could. As the Chevette slowly approached the entrance, the neighborhood sign came into view, a small wooden brick job that appeared to have stood the test of time and the pranks from my childhood buddies. It was an unfortunate target of rotten eggs, stink bombs, spray paint, and toilet paper. There wasn't one weekend that sign didn't have some kind of shit all over it. The kids loved to muck it up. Don't ask me why, they just did. I was guilty too, of course, it's true. And here we are, country down estates, Jason said, cranking the steering wheel to the right and pulling into the neighborhood. The street stretched a ways up an incline, just like I remembered, before actually entering the community. It seemed to me that I remembered the street to be a lot longer than it actually was. As a kid, it seemed like it took forever to go up that street. But in reality, it really wasn't long at all. Jason's Chevette screamed up the hill, chugging and clunking as he downshifted to second gear. The car was really on its last leg. I thought the transmission was going to fall out, the way it grinded and clunked and all. "Come on, baby," Jason screamed, "you can do it." As he pushed the Chevette harder, memories from my childhood came rushing into my head. I remembered riding my bicycle on this street, my ultra-cool Diamondback BMX bike. I saved months and months worth of allowances and yard cutting money to buy that bike. We'd pop wheelies off the curbs and make skid marks on the driveways of all the old men who hated skid marks on their driveways. Those old bastards, they just hated it when we came whizzing down the street. They'd run and get their water hoses and try to act like they were watering their yards. I think maybe they thought we'd leave them alone if they had hoses in their hands, but we'd zoom in and skid on their driveways anyway, and they just hated it. They'd scream and yell and squirt the skid marks so they wouldn't set on the hot cement. I always got a kick out of that. We left skid marks everywhere. We also passed Beth Meyer's old house, the first girl I ever kissed. I took a good look at that house as we went by, remembering sitting in her backyard behind the tool shed. We were dared by our so-called friends to kiss each other, and we lived up to that dare. Clumsily kissing, our eyes closed and our little hands clenched. We were so scared to do it. The sloppy wet kiss repulsed the two of us, yet it brought us closer together in a rare moment of maturity and adolescent clarity. I kept that moment in a special place within my heart. This was the first time that moment had surfaced in a really long time. I wonder what good old Beth was doing these days. Isn't that Beth Meyer's old house? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Yep, sure is. She's still around here somewhere. I'm not quite sure where, but I know she stayed in Montgomery and went to college and all. I'm sure you could find her if you tried. I'm not sure I want to do that, I said. Remember when you guys sucked face in her backyard? You guys sure didn't kiss right. Not like normal people anyway, that's for sure. You look like a couple of catfish attached to the face and all. Jason started laughing like a goddamn hyena. He had this laugh that was a combination of wheezing and coughing and snorting, except that he'd do all those things really fast like he was choking on a hunk of beef jerky. It was annoying and funny to hear at the same time. He hadn't changed one bit. That dare sure brings a smile to my face whenever I drive by that house. I bet that was the inspiration for a lot of stories you've written, huh? Sure was, I said. This old neighborhood has inspired countless poems and stories and even my new novel in a way. I've sucked the marrow out of many memories and recollections and created some great literature. Did you ever imagine, back when you lived here, that you would finally get out of Montgomery and become a famous writer and all, he said. I always knew I would be a writer even when I lived here. This part of country down estates was like the more upscale part, housing some of the higher-ranked officers from Gunter, the nearby Air Force Base. The well-manicured lawns were green and neat as I remembered. My father was a newly promoted major back then. My family's house fit snugly in the middle of the other major and colonel families and their near-identical houses. It was all a bunch of shit, though. It all seemed nice and suburban and perfect, but Montgomery was a really fucked up place. I mean, racism was still pretty rampant in this part of the country, and Montgomery was no different. They tried to cover the racism with monkey grass and iced tea, but it was still there, ugly as ever. But I'll get to that later. The part of the neighborhood where Jason lived was a few notches down the social ladder, houses that were a little older and a little bit run down compared to the houses my family lived around. It was kind of like the middle-class ghetto over there. The strange thing about Jason's family, though, is that even though they lived in the rundown part of the neighborhood, and their house was run down and their cars were run down, they had a lot of rundown things. I mean, they had 4 cars and a swimming pool and a lake house and a ski boat, and they always seemed to have money. Everything they had just looked run down. I never could figure it out. I never could figure out if they were just messy pigs or something, and they just liked it that way. Maybe they just didn't care about all that class stuff. Who cares about that stuff anyway? Jason put the car in neutral, then stopped. We sat in front of another house full of memories for us. Remember that house, he asked, pointing to the brown one-story home. That's Darren Reedy's old house, isn't it? I said. Sure is, he said. He sighed and leaned back in his seat with his arms behind his head. He had this stupid look on his face, this content and happy look. I knew he was thinking about something. Whatever happened to that sick little freak, I asked. Darren was a sick little bastard, it's true. But he was our friend, too. Everyone has one of those sick bastard friends in their childhood, and Darren was our sick bastard friend. Remember how he used to torture pets? Darren's dead, Jason said. He couldn't have been any more blunt about it. What a shocker. He just blurted it out like it was nothing, like it was just old news. I didn't know what to say. In a way, it wasn't like it was really surprising or anything like that. Darren was a sick little bastard that did sick things to defenseless animals. But it's just so definite and blunt and direct the way he said it. Jason was like that, though. He was direct as hell. He got that from his mother. She was direct as hell, too. His whole family was direct as hell. It drove me crazy sometimes. I just wanted to let you know in case you wanted to stop by or something. His mother's still quite upset about it. And if you stopped by and asked her about him, she would probably break down. You know, cry and all. He died kind of a bizarre death. What happened, I asked. I'll tell you about it later. No need to put a damper on your visit so early. You have plenty of time to hear about it. Remind me tonight and I'll tell you. Jason revved the Chevette into first gear and drove a few houses down. He stopped again and put the car in park. I was still in shock about Darren. I was too shocked to notice anything. And here it is. Does it look exactly as you remembered, he asked. I climbed out and stood there on the curb by the side of my car. We were parked in front of my childhood home. Man, you want to talk about memories. This place was full of them. Still painted white and brown, it looked just like I remembered. Yet it was a little different too. The grass was shaggier and unkempt. The roof looked worn and in need of repair. One of the windows in the front was cracked, but I could picture myself playing in the front yard when I was a kid, playing lawn darts or touch football. We'd play late into the evenings well after dark. The house didn't seem as big as I remembered, though. Isn't it funny how things are always not as big as you remember? It looks pretty close to what I remember. Pretty close, I said. Who lives there now? Nobody. It's vacant. It was up for sale, but it didn't sell. I think the owners are going to do some work on it before trying to sell it again. Interesting, I said. That's why it looks kind of crappy now. Not like when your dad was here. This lawn was like a golf course putting green back then, remember? Of course I remember. I was the one who had to cut it every 5 days. My dad was a fucking slave driver when it came to the lawn. It seemed like I was always cutting and trimming it. Raking, watering, weed eating, fertilizing. A huge chunk of my childhood consisted of taking care of this goddamn yard. And for what? Look at it now. Any signs of the hard work I did was all gone, completely gone. Jason noticed that I was still a little sore about the subject. To be honest, I was pretty goddamn sore about it. Come on, get over it. That was a long time ago, he said, walking back to his side of the Chevette. Betty's waiting for us at the house. She probably made us some cookies or something. He hopped back in the turd on wheels and we ventured toward Jason's house. More memories rushed into my mind. The bike races down Smithson Street, trick-or-treating and the poop bag pranks, hikes through the woods behind the neighborhood, finding playboys in a ditch behind the school. As the wind and pine tree smell rushed in the window of the car, I felt like I was 13 again. It's funny what your mind will file away if it's not using it. I hadn't thought about all these things for a long time, and they were coming to life by the dozens. Hey, there's Patty Green's house right there, the yellow one. Jason pointed to the little yellow house as we drove by. Patty had the unfortunate status of being the 7th grade whore. She quickly turned from prissy little Patty to Patty the hooker one night when a small group of boys and girls convened at her house for her 13th birthday party. The party started innocently enough with chocolate cake and vanilla ice cream and party games and presents and pin the tail on the donkey. But once the uninterested parents moved inside to the bar for scotch on the rocks and cold beers, we kids moved to the garage for a quick game of spin the bottom. Patty received 2 spins since it was her birthday, and she kissed 2 boys. She kissed Jason, who for the rest of his junior high days was in love with Patty, and Justin Moss. The other kids affectionately called him Mossy on account of his dingy teeth, rotten gums, and stinky breath. The combination of kissing 2 boys and the excitement brought on by all the goddamn sugar the kids ate generated the incessant hateful chatter. Patty clearly loved being the center of attention, which to our young eyes meant she enjoyed acting morally reprehensible, of course. She was labeled a whore that night and was scarred for the rest of junior high. I never got to spend the bottle because Patty took my turn, I said. She might not have been called a whore if you'd gone instead. Think about it. Unless she kissed me, of course. I think her fate was set already, I said. I thought fondly of little blonde Patty. She was a beautiful little girl, and though I didn't have the courage to tell her back then, because of the stupid talk from the other kids, I liked her very much, even when the other goddamn kids called her a whore. One thing I knew for sure back then was that Patty wasn't a whore, and I sympathized with her unfortunate circumstance. The day before I moved away to Texas forever, I rode my bike all the way to Patty's house. I rode fast and determined, the adrenaline pumping through my veins, and leapt from my bike while it was still moving when I reached her house. Leaving it on its side in the street, I ran to the front door and rang the bell. I remembered hoping that her father wouldn't answer the door, and fortunately, he didn't. When she answered, I took her by the hand without saying a word and led her to the side of the house. Next to the air conditioner, she looked to me to say something, anything about why I was there, but I didn't say a word. I didn't know what to say anyway. All I knew was that I liked her. I leaned over and kissed her, a long, lingering, soft kiss. We slowly embraced each other, my hands on her hips, her arms draped across my shoulders. As my lips pressed against hers, I could feel the emotion overcoming her. Her lips quivered as we kissed. She knew, without me saying anything, that I liked her, and I didn't think of her in the hateful way the other goddamn kids did. And after 5 minutes, I pulled away from her and smiled. I still didn't know what to say. I turned and ran for my bike. Picking it up, I mounted my trusty BMX bicycle and headed home. I never saw or heard from her again after I moved away. Her fate, huh? That's unfortunate, Jason said. It sure was, I said. And I still didn't know what to say.